not even engaging, but just seeing it around is like more comical, because when people would talk shit about Conor McGregor, nobody would be like, oh, you just hate Irish people. Oh, you hate Catholics. You know what I mean? Like, it was all like, oh, you're jealous of his success. The shit you usually hear. And with Islam and Khabib, it's like, you know, you hate the Muslim horde. It's like you're an affront to God. It's like it's that's a different layer. You're like a fucking racist Islamophobe if you criticize them. So you get much worse accusations leveled at you, which is good fun.
Yeah.
Well, they'll have to be pleased with this one.
Yep.
Because I spent the entire time being very confident that Makhachev's going to win.
Inshallah.
Hello, ladies, gents. Welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor. That's Phil. Phil, welcome to Heavy Hands. You must be excited to be here.
Yeah, this is a remarkably stilted intro, even by your lofty standards. You being just overwhelmed? Are you overwhelmed by the sheer quality of UFC 280?
I must be, yeah. Either that or I've lost my touch, and as all other things in my life, this too will eventually fail. How you doing, buddy?
Not too bad. Yeah,
Great.
like I said, I am looking forward to a pretty stellar UFC card that I don't really know who's going to win apart from the really obvious fights.
Yeah, it's very solid. UFC 280 is, of course, the card we're talking about. You knew that already. Unless, you know, like, one of these days, like, maybe the YouTube algorithm will just, like, start suggesting our things to, like, fans of other sports, and they'll have no idea what they're listening to. And our show has become so inside and self-referential. They'd be like, what's a sadness hedge? What's
Who's got the worst brain thinking?
Yeah.
That seems like a tautology.
But for those, you know, few hundred of you who regularly listen to the show and know exactly what we're talking about, then of course you're aware. We have Charles Oliveira philosophically defending his title, to hear the way most fans are talking about it, against Islam Makhachev. We have in the co-main event Aljamain Sterling defending his very real title, which he has first won and then successfully defended. Both unequivocal successes against former disgraced champion TJ Dillashaw, who fans have now started to turn back towards because Aljamain Sterling was taking a bunch of photos with who's that guy that everyone hates?
Andrew Tate.
Okay, right. I truly don't know who he is.
I think you're just better off that way.
Great.
Saw a clip of him on some weird YouTube dating show, and it wasn't edifying.
Yeah, I saw a picture of a tweet exchange where he was mad at some guy, so he told him to beg him to contribute to the GoFundMe for his dying son. So that was cool. That was classy. And then we've got Petr Yan, the former almost champion. Wait, no.
What?
He was the champion, right?
Yes, he was.
So much shit has happened in Petr Yan's last few fights that I forgot. He won the title in that fight with Aldo? Okay, great. I haven't gone completely insane yet. And he's taking on Sean O'Malley. No idea what's going to happen in that one.
The puzzler.
I think we're also probably going to try to squeeze in Beneil Dariush versus Mateusz Gamrot. 4 very good fights on top of many other very good fights that we simply are not going to have time to cover. Maybe we will mention some of them in the bonus episode, which we will also be recording today. But we also have to discuss some of the events of the Grasso versus Araujo card from last weekend, most notably the incredible late career victory of one 40-year-old Rafael Assunção. And that is going to be, as far as I'm concerned, the main thrust of that entire bonus episode. But enough about all that. We have a main event here. We have what is, practically a title defense. What is a title fight? Chucky Olives, Islam Makhachev. What do you think, Phil?
I don't know, man.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't know.
I kind of do know, but I want you to waffle first.
Oh, I mean, so the obvious thing is that whilst we've been talking for a while about how eventually Chucky Olives is gonna roll the dice and they're not gonna come up in his favor again, right?
Yeah.
We've been talking about the fact that he's getting dropped and hurt in every fight, and at least one of these times he's just not going to get up again.
Yeah.
And every time that's been true, he has still been badly hurt, and his fights he's been perilously close to getting finished. This is the fight where he's the least likely to get insta-splattered.
Mm-hmm.
But you also find yourself thinking, how often has that really been the way to beat Charles Oliveira? Like,
yeah,
we talk about the times where he's been broken by people, or where he's, suddenly finished, or anything like this. How often has it been due to striking, and how much has it been because someone has out-grappled him?
Mm-hmm.
So Makhachev seems...
The answer is sort of half and half, actually.
Mm-hmm.
The guy's had a million action fights. He's lost, I think, 8-9 times over the course of a, 40-some fight career.
Yeah.
But certainly there have been enough notable losses on the ground to think that, you don't have to KO Charles Oliveira to beat him. He is not, as all of his recent opponents believe, impervious or invincible in the grappling phase.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so there's generally been two ways in which this has happened. People have started just beating him up in top position, or they've gained top position and they've been grappling with him, and he's completely lost track of who is allowed to be. He's completely lost track of the fact that his opponents also have a submission offense,
yeah,
and has dived headlong into a guillotine. Either of which particularly, and I've mentioned this every time he's fought people, including Chandler and Poirier. I was like, Chandler's never guillotined anyone. He might guillotine Chucky Olives, and he really almost did.
Mm-hmm.
So Makhachev does seem kind of stylistically primed to take advantage of that. With like a bunch of caveats, and
so did Gaethje, actually. By the way, Gaethje also had the first front headlock. I think there's a point early in that fight where they swapped front headlocks in the clinch. But yeah, sorry, go on.
Like he seems primed from a stylistic perspective, but also like there's just a real nagging feeling that I get, and it's not even based in raw technical analysis or anything or anything like that. It's just my general feeling that, like, MMA doesn't like dynasties.
Mm.
I mean, the last time we had the protege of a divisional GOAT who was, fighting for the belt, and he was maybe technically a bit broader, but athletically less imposing than the great fighter who came before him, and he was going up against a flawed, beloved, long-term action fighter.
Mm-hmm.
I picked Rory without a lot of second guessing. I was just like, well, Lawler's just lost enough fights where he's been out-grappled. I just lost enough fights where he's been out-grappled. I trust McDonald to have improved his striking enough to be able to survive, all that other kind of stuff. And it just didn't happen. And just find myself wondering, like, are we doing this again? Because Makhachev, his I think he's probably physically, in terms of the pure athleticism, he's closer to Khabib than Rory was to GSP. But he's also, like, the advantage that Rory had over GSP was that he was much bigger than him. But he's also, like, he's someone that just hasn't been tested in wars at all.
Sure.
And if there's one thing about, his closest war is it's like a real hard sparring match against Arman Sarukian, like a really tough roll, basically.
Yeah.
They're both going for it, but it's just grappling.
Mm-hmm.
I do find myself wondering, like, is being the number 2 in his particular, in his gym, always being the second guy to Khabib, has it really, and just mostly having either, immediate destructions or just very controlled performances over the people he's beaten, has it prepared him to fight Charles Oliveira? Because Chucky Olives has lost to 2 wrestlers before, and he has been beaten from top position. It has never been easy. No one has ever done it without getting hurt, without getting put in compromising positions.
Sure.
I find myself wondering, like, what if Makhachev just gets dragged into that war, and we're just like, oh yeah, he's just not mentally equipped to be here in the same way that Charles Oliveira now is.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's not going to stop me picking Makhachev, because on the first point, me picking Makhachev here, which I think I'm going to do, unless you say something mind-blowing that changes my mind, has nothing to do with him being the heir to Khabib. I mean, not insofar as that is just, like, sort of, his style is obviously very much like Khabib's. I mean, let's be honest, if we're talking proteges, Makhachev looks a lot more like Khabib than Rory did like GSP. Obviously there are differences in how he carries himself, but the end goal of what he wants to do to people is exactly what Khabib wanted to do to people. Get on top of them, ride them, put them in some kind of, like, stuck in a transition between 2 not good, but certainly better than the space between positions, and break them over time. That's a Khabib fight. That's a Makhachev fight. That's the extent to which I'm thinking about Khabib and his legacy at all in regards to this matchup. I'm thinking more about how Charles Oliveira's game works. And Charles Oliveira's game works. Well, lately we've talked about this multiple times. Lately we've talked about, or rather, lately it's been the case that people have just refused to follow him to the ground. He's verdooming it. He's using it to his advantage, like, quite plainly. The more you watch these recent fights, it's like he's not, 70% of the time he goes down, he's not actually been knocked down. Not in the sense of, oh, he couldn't keep his feet. He gets buzzed and literally falls on his back. And it's a recovery position for him. Gaethje dropped him, and Oliveira, was he hurt? Absolutely. But he just went down, and Gaethje did what Poirier before him did, what Chandler did to a slightly lesser extent. What a lot of these people did. He just was like, oh, you can't go into Charles Oliveira's guard. Well, what happens when people go into Charles Oliveira's guard is not necessarily that they get destroyed. Certainly that happens sometimes, but let's be honest. Oliveira doesn't submit people from guard very often. He can create sweeps and scrambles from there. He's aggressive. He'll use submission attempts to improve his position. But the people who have just applied the knowledge that now, some 35 years of, like, MMA development in the UFC has granted them, which is that guard is bad. People who have approached Oliveira's guard with that mindset have often crushed him.
after getting into lots of trouble.
Absolutely. They have to ward off
Pretty
all
much
those submission
universally.
attempts. Yeah, they have to ward off all
was
those.
within inches of getting submitted. This was,
Sure. Anthony Pettis had to fight off a bunch of arm bars and triangles.
Back.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself wondering, like, are you fully confident that Makhachev is going to aggressively pursue takedowns against Charles Oliveira? Because
I think it would be idiotic not to. So maybe he won't, but I would be like...
What would you have classified as being the safest way for Islam Makhachev to have fought... If you hadn't seen them fight, what do you think would have been the safest way for Islam Makhachev to have fought Thiago Moises?
However he wanted, because Thiago Moises isn't very good.
Yeah, but he's still like an effective counterpuncher. He's certainly a less potent ground grappler than like Charles Oliveira is.
Yeah, and he went in there and he grappled him.
Eventually, he went in there and grappled him.
No, he got him down by the end of the first round. He didn't press the issue like desperately as if it's the only thing he could do, but that's because you're perfectly safe at range with Thiago Moises. He did out-grapple him. He crushed him on the ground.
Eventually.
I mean, the process began pretty early in the fight. It eventually, in the sense that, yes, it's a slow wearing and inexorable pressure, just as it is when Khabib took people down. It was never the first takedown that destroyed them. Yeah, but he did out-grapple Moises. He wasn't... Makhachev he grappled with Tsarukyan. He's not... Makhachev isn't afraid of a tough grappling match. I have absolutely no reason to think that Makhachev, A, will get submitted, or B, and this would be worse, will be afraid of getting submitted to the extent that he doesn't do the thing he does better than anything else. He's got to grapple Charles Oliveira. I'm going to say that, yeah, he will. I have to assume that, because if he doesn't, he deserves to lose. That's such a huge missed opportunity if he doesn't try to test Chucky Olive's grappling.
I think it's not a question of me thinking, like, is he going to try and out-kickbox Charles Oliveira? Because I think that's obviously insane. Just a question of, like, is he prepared to go in there and start grappling immediately? Is he prepared for things to start going wrong immediately? Because we really haven't seen these fights out of him. So that, like, this is the Rory parallel for me, not necessarily it's that Rory could never really win wars throughout his time in his throughout his UFC tenure. Going back to the Carlos Condit fight. And we just haven't seen Islam Makhachev being in that situation. He's either controlling or he's just blowing people out.
Yeah, but why haven't we?
People have never controlled Charles Oliveira, and they've never blown him out with grappling.
People have controlled Charles Oliveira.
Not without getting into trouble.
Well, that depends on what you define as trouble. If you're Paul Felder and you're watching it through the same eyes as Joe Rogan and John Anik were as it was playing out, you think he's in trouble the whole time because he's having to defend submissions, and obviously
because
Charles Oliveira is better at submissions.
Incredibly close to being submitted, yes.
Yeah, but strategically, defending submissions, that's like the baseline skill you need to have to do anything in MMA. I think more people throughout this recent run, and obviously this is easier said than done, and I get why people avoid this. Like, there's two perspectives here, right? And this is something that I think is going to carry over into our next fight as well. I think this dynamic may very well be a sort of thematic link between this and Dillashaw Sterling. There's two mindsets you can take, right? Oh no, this is where he's best. I shouldn't fight there. Or, what if I fight where he's best and beat him? He's going to lose. It's going to be a precipitous drop-off in confidence. That's how you crush somebody. That's how you don't just beat them, but you crush them, which is what has happened on the few occasions when people have been like, yeah, you're going to play guard? Okay, that doesn't work. We know that. We figured that out 20 years ago. It's a bad way to fight, because it is. This is like what I was saying with the Paul Craig Volkan Oezdemir shit. It is Özdemir's best place as a fighter grappling? No. Is it Paul Craig's best phase? Yes. What happened when Oezdemir finally just accepted that he's going to be in this guy's guard? He started crushing him. Because guard's bad. It's a defensive position. It's bad. It's like fighting from the corner the entire time. But worse, because you can't get out without having to execute a complicated sequence of moves. You can't just pivot out of the corner when you're on your back. And this dovetails with the other like long-held belief of mine, which is that you should never, whenever possible, you should never curtail your own natural tendencies in order to avoid the place where you think your opponent is most dangerous. Fighting against type to avoid what the other guy does, it's a like, I'm not saying this judgmentally, people have done it, but it is a cowardly approach in that it makes you feel like a coward when you're fighting. You have to go in there and you have to have the confidence. You have to feel brave. You have to feel like Conor McGregor said, you know, I don't think about what my opponent's going to do. I think about what I'm good at, and I go in there and I do it. And obviously things are more complex than that, but what's the reason Makhachev hasn't been in a lot of wars? It's because people don't get to have wars with him. That's why Tsarukyan was the closest thing to a war, and he looked perfectly comfortable. Here's a guy who's taking him down, who's constantly scrambling and winning scrambles. A guy, by the way, who was strong enough at times to just fucking stand up with Makhachev on top of him. It didn't appear to dent Makhachev's confidence at all. He looked perfectly comfortable in that fight. And indeed, it was Tsarukyan by the end who was starting to gas and looking broken. And knowing that that's the closest I've seen to a Makhachev war, because otherwise the only way to get a war out of Makhachev is to compete with him in his best phase. And one of the best ways of breaking Charles Oliveira is to do the same. Why would I not pick Makhachev here? I just, you know, as long as he's grappling, I have every faith in him to defend submissions, especially if, as it will likely be, Oliveira spends most of those, or is attempting most of those submissions off his back. You know?
Yeah, but the other thing about Charles Oliveira is that he doesn't play guard much anymore.
Well, nobody engages in his guard.
What's that?
Nobody engages in his guard. He'd play guard a lot more if anybody would follow him down when they drop him.
No, but I mean, even in his like, there's sort of three phases in his career when he's just, you know, there's his early one, his early career where he's just kind of a wild mess. Mm-hmm. Then he's, you know, fighting from guard. He's just looking for submissions. Mm-hmm. And there's his sort of gatekeeper-y featherweight run. Yeah. Then there's the him getting forced up to lightweight and sort of transforming into the fighter that we see today. Right. I think even in the featherweight run, there's lots of times when guys like Ricardo Lamas or Pettis would get top position and Oliveira would fight to sweep or to change position. For sure. He wouldn't necessarily, you know, he doesn't play guard and look for submissions. He does work his way to the top. Do expect, this is the thing, like, I expect that if Makhachev gets Oliveira down, he's going to have to, you know, it's not going to be like the end, this is the end of the round. Like, every round is just going to be... I agree, yeah. Makhachev taking him down, and then Oliveira just, you know, throws up useless submissions from his back. And then, you know, until the end of the round, and then Oliveira just looks like, oh no, that was the worst experience ever. I fully expect he is going to get out of grounded positions. He is going to potentially turn them around on Makhachev, and he's going to have positions of being on the feet. Sorry, he's going to have periods of being able to work his game on the feet. He's
going to attack, and he's going to, you know, whether he's going for a sweep or combining it with an attack, he's going to sweep, and he's going to scramble. He also might, you know, what happens when Oliveira scrambles? He might get front headlocked.
Yeah, that is, as I said, that is always the, like, he is one of those few guys where I would genuinely recommend, you know, everyone learning the tactical thing of just having a guillotine in your back pocket when you're fighting him.
Yeah. But who sweeps Makhachev, though, Phil? Who sweeps Makhachev? The most Arman Tsarukyan could do, a very good grappler, who tried to sweep, by the way. He tried elevator sweeps. He tried a Kimura sweep at one point in that fight. Makhachev's hips are like fucking granite. Like, it's very difficult to sweep. The most Tsarukyan could do was to get up. And that's a possibility. But every get-up attempt does mean an opportunity to grab Charles Oliveira's skinny neck. And otherwise, I mean, yes, he might sweep, and maybe that leads to the kind of war that you're correct in saying we haven't seen Makhachev deal with before. But, yeah, like, what if he just doesn't get swept? Or if he does get swept, is that a reason enough to assume that then he's going to lose not just the round, but the fight? I don't think so. I just don't have any good reason not to pick Makhachev here. I wish I could say otherwise. You know, Lord knows I like Chuck Yalev's style a whole hell of a lot better. But,
yeah, I don't. It's not even that for me. I'm not actually that emotionally invested in it. I do like Chuck Yalev's a lot, but I also feel a lot for Makhachev that has been this kind of, he has just been the Ersatz Khabib for his career, and that's all people really think of him as.
It's just time for him to make his own legacy.
I wouldn't mind seeing him, be able to step out from like Khabib's shadow.
Sure. I
feel like he is unfairly maligned as a boring fighter just because he is the most boring fighter at the top of lightweight.
Yeah. But God knows he could possibly exceed Khabib if he defends the title 4 times. Mm-hmm. With his own legacy, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the fact that I haven't. There's just flavors of fight that I just haven't seen from Makhachev.
Yeah,
I think I tend to agree with you. It's my first take on the fight as well. It's just that, we've mentioned this going all the way back to like the Kevin Lee fight when we said basically Kevin Lee could probably win this if he just keeps aggressively grappling with Charles Oliveira, but he's not going to, and he's probably going to get submitted.
Yeah.
He's going to lose on the feet and get submitted. That is still a possibility, I think, here. But I think it is less likely. Makhachev has shown none of those issues that Kevin Lee had with his gas tank.
Yeah.
And he just seems more likely. He is an extraordinarily good submission grappler. He's not even just a wrestler.
Right.
He is a phenomenal submission grappler in his own right. I mean, I think the closest analog to people that Charles Oliveira has fought. The problem is that Islam has fought no one like Charles Oliveira, but the closest analog to him that Chucky Olives has fought is, I think, either Ricardo Lamas or Jim Miller, both of whom beat him.
Yeah.
And both of whom are, much smaller than Islam Makhachev.
Yeah. Granted, in a much earlier stage of his career. And having gone back this week and watched a lot of Charles's earlier fights, because that's what you have to do if you want to see more losses, because he's been winning for so long now. But, he's notably better. His striking is so much more confident, so much smoother. Has his defense gotten dramatically better? No, but he's not putting himself. You have to actually go and take the opening from him. He's not just flinging himself into counter shots. His distance management, his balance, all these little elements of striking have made him so much better.
His punching mechanics are,
oh my god,
now terrifyingly good.
Yeah. I mean, I watched that fight with Anthony Pettis, and it's he was getting absolutely destroyed in the feet, and all he could do was fling himself forward and fall over on every right hand he let go. That doesn't happen anymore. But yeah, why is that? Why is that phase of the fight going to happen? And so much of the reason we've gotten to see so much of Charles's brilliant striking is simply the fact that people aren't willing to grapple with him. And I haven't seen a reason yet to think that a strong positional grappler like Makhachev, who has great submission defense, who is a great scrambler, who has a deep, deep well of takedowns to choose from. You know, who can hit a takedown from virtually any position and chain one together after the other. That like he can actually afford to even put himself in bad spots more than the other guys who have, let's not forget, beaten Charles on the ground. I don't know. I mean, maybe the only weakness here is that there's the possibility that Makhachev lacks Khabib's ferocity sometimes. He's more positionally focused, and really the way to beat Charles is to like defend 8 submissions in a row and then start absolutely destroying him with strikes. But I also think Islam is perfectly capable of that. He's done it more and more, even in recent fights. So, yeah, I'm sympathetic to your concerns. You're right. There are questions that have just simply not been asked, not to mention answered.
Yeah. And there is directional. The two best grapplers that Makhachev fought were, the two best submission threats that he fought are Hamosh and Moises, and they are his they are pretty much his two most striking heavy performances. Do worry that there is an element. That's the thing. I just find myself worrying that there is an element of risk management in his game, which is going to, another classic theme in heavy hands, make the fight much riskier for him. Yeah,
that it would be suicidal. I mean, if he doesn't, if he comes in here and thinks he has to strike with Charles, he still might not lose.
He has to build into it, for example.
Yeah, and he still might not lose, but he's going to have to switch gears really quickly, because what's going to happen is he's going to get hurt. And he's going to then have to panic wrestle and find a position where he can calm the fuck down and settle in. I think he should just meet Charles Oliveira at whatever point in the cage he wants to meet him, and then immediately body lock and run him to the fence. That just seems like such an obvious strategy. I know it's a dangerous guard, but you aren't Justin Gaethje. And even, again, I have to say, even guys like Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier probably would have been much better served to say, there's a thing, and God forgive me, Phil, I'm gonna make a chess comparison. There's a thing.
Chess comparisons.
there's a thing in chess. You know, there are some openings that are gambits. You give something away, usually material, in exchange for some kind of compensation, for some kind of initiative or attack or whatever. And many gambits, if not the vast majority of them, are dubious. They don't actually work unless the opponent respects them, unless the opponent believes the gambit. And that has been, I think, the story of a lot of Chucky's recent fights, is that people, they see him get hurt and fall to his back and wave them into his guard, and as it used to work for Verdum, they believe him. They're like, oh, he's confident there, that must be dangerous. And I think in high-level fighting or chess, often the best approach is to say to the person who's gambiting something, okay, prove it. You think you can win like this? Let's see. Let's find out. That I think.
I think that's been a big part of, you know, his recoverability as well.
Absolutely.
Simply the fact that every time that happens, he's like, oh, they're scared of me.
Yeah, his
it's
confidence.
not just the fact that he gets a chance to clear his head, but he's like, oh, these guys don't want to fight me here. Yeah. I'm still the big dog in the cage. I'm going to go after them.
Right.
Yeah.
He dropped me, and somehow that's a win for me. Is how it feels to Chucky. I think many more of his recent opponents would have found more success if they had just said to him, prove it, and tested his guard. And yes, they would have had to ward off submissions. Yes, they would have ended up in sticky situations, but the opposite of that ballooning confidence might have happened. We've seen it before. That is a reliable way to deflate Charles Oliveira, is to let him engage where he thinks he's best. Let him pull the ace out of his sleeve, and then just smash him, or at least just don't go away. And if there's any tendency to break left in Charles Oliveira, that is the thing that has masked it. And I don't think you have to be particularly breakable, as Oliveira has been in the past, to be broken when somebody takes you on in your A game. and just wins. That's a horrible, horrible feeling. So, and then after that, I don't know, maybe we see Charles Oliveira's takedown defense or something, but he's just like an all-out... No.
Never been great.
He's an all-out aggression fighter, and it's like, the more I can push you back, the more I can test you, I feel good. The more I have to worry about what you might do to me, I'm not having a good time. So, I absolutely have to pick Islam Makhachev.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to do it as well. But yeah, there's still just that kind of niggling feeling that he's that kind of risk management. His style is not just it's not just fighting smart. That it might be pathological. It might be something that he genuinely needs to do.
Yeah,
and that he's not ready for not going to be ready for the kind of insane fight that Charles Oliveira can bring at every stage.
Yeah,
that if he gets shaken out of being, the world's most controlled and Khabib's best possible sparring partner, if he gets shaken out of that mentality, I don't know where he goes after that.
It's a very valid question. But strategically,
I kind of have to pick Makhachev. Just it's the things like the Lamas fight. I think all the scrambles and all the places that they went. It was the fact that Oliveira just, when he gets into ground battles, he burns himself out. Yeah. And I think we're going to have to talk. We'll talk more about that in our next section as well. But yeah, I'll take Makhachev, but I have a lot more trepidation about it than you do.
You have to at least acknowledge that the win is on the table for Makhachev, and strategically, the best way to manage risk would be to accept the tactical risk of engaging Oliveira on the ground. If he doesn't do that, he deserves to lose.
Agreed.
All right, let's take a break then. When we come back, Aljo defending his belt against the former champ, TJ Dillashaw. After that, Piotr Jan versus Sean O'Malley, Benil Dariush versus Mateusz Gamrot coming up. Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it. All right, folks, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are moving on to the co-main event now of UFC 280. We already hinted pretty heavily at some sort of the carryover of a certain theme or motif from the main event into this fight. Being that, Phil, I think you mentioned what happens if one guy gets really tired from doing the thing that he's good at.
Yep.
That might happen. This one also, strangely, I come in with like a gut feeling that through any amount of interrogation, I actually have not managed to shake myself of. So like the main event, while I'm very interested, I kind of feel like I know how it's going to play out, and I will be greatly surprised if it doesn't follow those broad lines.
Are you once again referring to the martial art of cowards?
That's right. No, not necessarily. I don't know. I just think the challenger is going to win in both these fights. I think TJ Dillashaw, like Islam Makhachev, just has certain stylistic sort of bulwarks that I don't really see Sterling breaking through. Namely that...
the martial art of cowards, wrestling.
Oh, yes. I see what you're saying, yes. Namely that I don't think Sterling has any way of enforcing the cowards martial art if Dillashaw doesn't want him to. And then he is stuck on the feet with a guy who I know can push a super hard pace for 25 minutes. So that looks like a Dillashaw win to me. Now let's discuss why I might be wrong before finally going back to say that I wasn't.
Yeah, so that is also my initial read on it. That I think that the main read for Dillashaw sort of coming up this time when he's been, returning from his previous suspension is that if he was in physical shape, it would be a really tough matchup for Aljamain Sterling, maybe the toughest. But the assumption would be that he just wasn't gonna look like he was in physical shape. As it turned out, not necessarily the case.
No, he looked fine against Sandhagen.
Yeah, he looks still looks fast, still looks impossible to keep down, still can keep a tremendous pace. He definitely, I think he definitely lost against Sandhagen, but he looked pretty much just like TJ Dillashaw.
Yep.
And that is a tough style matchup. I think there are a few things that I think tilt in favor of Aljamain Sterling. I think Dillashaw has mostly sort of fought short people.
Yeah,
like being a kind of short bantamweight himself.
Another common thread with the main event, that it is actually shockingly difficult to find a good parallel for Sterling on Dillashaw's resume. Like it's Dominic Cruz for the wrestling, or it's Corey Sandhagen for like the size and kicking.
Yes.
And even those aren't really great points of comparison. Yeah, he's fought a bunch of little dudes. Rafael Sunsao, John Lineker, Cody. It's shocking, in fact, the number of Mike Easton. Like, all these dudes are little.
Yeah, I mean, like Henan Barao, I think, is probably was pretty tall, but is also incredibly static, and was actually, like, in many ways quite a difficult fight for TJ, where he just simply had to. The fact that Barao was static meant that TJ essentially forced his way inside and then just buzzsawed him.
Yeah.
Whilst Barao stood there and tried to trade.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's that. There's also the fact that I think that while Dillashaw mostly looks physically okay recently, as again surprisingly good, I think he is a little bit of a slow starter. Think he does strike me as someone who thinks he's better defensively and like slicker than he actually is.
Absolutely.
I think this has always been something that has sort of struck me about Dillashaw, is that there is a lot of window dressing in terms of the stance switches and so on. His actual game is quite it's quite predicated on a timing switch up between his right hand and his high kick, and he's really a bit of his most comfortable style is actually is it right high? Well, it's either right or left really, but
he does both. It's usually the left high kick. He's like, I think a right-hander who likes to throw jabs and right hooks from southpaw, and then fire the left high kick.
Yeah, he'll often be like, switching it, shifting into it, and then and throwing it as the switch kick. But yeah, I think that's basically what he would really like to do. Is that he likes kind of fighting long, that he likes standing outside someone's range, and then running a sort of 2-3 way timing mix up on them. I think that Garbrandt fight really shows you what Dillashaw is when he's pared down to his most preferred style, is that he's just eating to throw. But that being said, he's also just like a natural fighter and is happily going to will happily fight wars if he has to. Yeah,
I think he's actually arguably at his best as like a swarmer in the pocket, as you said, buzzsawing people. People forget, I think, how often Dillashaw has looked unspectacular, unremarkable at range. Like, he didn't exactly blow Joe Soto out of the water instantly.
Oh.
He actually had quite a lot of difficulty. He wasn't losing at any point, but but it wasn't an easy fight at range. Obviously, Dominic Cruz gave him plenty of problems, though I still think he won that fight. Corey Sandhagen gave him plenty of problems, and I think he narrowly lost that fight. But for all the tall, long guys he's fought, even the rematch with Renan Barão, people being able to touch him at range has ultimately pushed him in the direction of having to just like sort of get in the pocket and exchange to beat them.
Yeah, he's also, but that that transformation kind of has to happen normally through him getting into trouble, and I think that is where you see the most. I think that's possibly where you see the most degradation in TJ Dillashaw, and that is something which Sterling has been very, very good at, is starting really super hot.
That's true.
And, you know, because Dillashaw has been hurt in the first round of what? Every one of his last 3 fights? You know.
Did he get hurt in the first round by Sandhagen?
He got dropped. The big left hook.
Oh, I thought that was in the...
He got flying kneed.
I thought that was in the second round. You're right.
I think it was the first round.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, I think I just misremembered it.
But yeah, so we're talking... did he get hurt by Garbrandt in their second fight?
He did. He got hurt early in both of those fights. And
obviously, Cejudo wipes him out.
Yep.
So, I think that is definitely something to be concerned about, is from a Dillashaw perspective. And to Sterling's credit, he is absolutely willing to enforce his game in his opponent's area of strength. You know, we talked about that from the other side. That was something he was totally willing to do against Peter Yan both times he fought. Mm-hmm. He was just like, I can't let this guy get reads on me. I'm just going to go after him. Same thing with like Jimmy Rivera.
Yep.
Just like, this guy's a much better, you know, these guys are much better strikers than him, but he just didn't. He knew that he had to make that not count, and he just went after them.
Pedro Munoz, an incredibly gutsy fight.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think there is a strong chance that, like, despite Dillashaw being, you know, still thought of as, you know, just more violent Dominic Cruz in some ways, that he's not really a tremendously good back foot fighter.
No,
and there's a strong chance that, like, Sterling just rushes him early and either hurts him or, you know, gets potentially manages to get some kind of like knockdown submission out of it. But I think the main problem is, you know, the one you alluded to, is that even if Sterling hurts TJ Dillashaw, you're gonna finish him with strikes? I would be fucking shocked.
Yeah, I would be absolutely stunned. I mean, I think maybe the most reasonable way for Sterling to win, because yeah, is he gonna finish him after he hurts him is one question. The other question is, can he out wrestle him? Because
that's the thing, is that if he hurts him, he can follow him to the ground, as people didn't do to Charles Oliveira.
Right.
I just think that TJ Dillashaw will just get back up again. He's one of the most physical scramblers and best counter wrestlers that we've ever seen outside of like Robert Whittaker.
Yeah. Yeah, he's unbelievable. I mean, I don't think there's any question, even though it was Dominic Cruz who, by the way, it took Dominic Cruz to hand TJ Dillashaw literally his first ever undefended takedowns. He's the first guy to ever take him down in the UFC. And he couldn't get him down and keep him there for more than a couple seconds. Like, as momentous as those things were, the big picture story of that fight is that TJ Dillashaw out-wrestled Dominic Cruz. Because he stuffed a hell of a lot more attempts than he actually failed to defend, and he escaped every single attempt that succeeded seconds after it succeeded. To the point where it's like, are those even successes? I would argue no. Because then he just wins the scramble instantly. So I think like maybe the most likely way for Sterling to convert some early pressure, which I think is a great point, I think he may very well take that tack, is no takedowns, jump on the back standing, that kind of thing. You know, like run to the back, use your length to just kind of hop into a backpack position. That's where you probably have the best chance. And yeah, Sterling is insanely dangerous there. You know, Rafael Sunsao is an exceedingly good grappler as well, and he threatened TJ with a rear naked choke, couldn't get it, but if Aljamain Sterling gets to that position, there's more reason to think he might be able to convert that into a win. But if your only way to conceivably out-grapple TJ Dillashaw is to first hurt him and then jump on his back, it seems like a long shot. Because otherwise, you're going to have to wrestle with him.
Well, you know, that was the long shot that he, you know, we would have said that it was very difficult to do against Peter Yan as well, but he still managed to do it.
He did. And he did it to Corey Sandhagen. And people forget that. Sandhagen
said was going to happen.
We did predict that one. But for all the amazing things that Corey Sandhagen has done since that, let us not forget that Aljamain Sterling just ran out and choked him out in a minute flat. Like, he did with a submission attack what people almost only ever do with strikes. Just basically flash subbed him. So yeah, I think that we'll probably see some hairy moments like that early in this fight. But as the fight plays out, and given that so far only Henry Cejudo, in a weight class that TJ Dillashaw never should have been at, only Henry Cejudo succeeded at actually finishing him quickly with strikes or in any way. Dillashaw always recovers.
And John Dodson, but I'm willing
Sure.
to say at this point that I don't think Aljamain Sterling is quite the puncher that Prime John Dodson is.
No,
Willing to make that bold claim.
You're going to get some pushback, but I support you in this. It's very brave of you, and I think you're probably right.
Thank you.
So, then you're dealing with, without his wrestling and his grappling, if that is taken out of the equation to the extent that I think it will be. Because if you can't backpack him, how the fuck do you take TJ Dillashaw down? You got to hit a quick-ass reactive shot like Dominic Cruz did while he's punching you. And that's not really something in Sterling's arsenal. Without that, are you not just a worse Corey Sandhagen? A slower, less agile, certainly more prone to gassing version of Corey Sandhagen. And that
certainly less durable.
And less durable. Much less durable. That sounds like a TJ Dillashaw win, strategically speaking.
So, one of the things I was mentioning before we started recording was Dillashaw should go for takedowns. Because Sterling, I think, is someone who historically, like Charles Oliveira, has been unable to stop himself from trying to dictate grappling exchanges. And which has essentially meant that he has tended to burn himself out with either his own grappling or with trying to compete with the other guy. So, I mean, both Yan fights obviously ended with him, him just desperately shooting takedowns over and over. The rematch is really oddly kind of misremembered, I guess, but just people just sort of gloss over the end of that fight. Because not only was it Aljamain Sterling just trying to shoot takedowns, but it was also Peter Yan just sitting there in totally uneventful top control.
Yeah.
For it wasn't what people expected, which is just that he would get exhausted and Yan would tear him to pieces.
Yeah.
It was just Yan also being tired and not being able to figure out how to do much more than just win the grappling.
Oh, by the way, I was right. The left hook knockdown was in the second round of Dillashaw's hand.
Oh, it was in the second round.
I just saw it happen. The flying knee.
It was the flying knee it was the knee in the first round.
The flying knee and running square into a stiff right hand. Those happened in the first round.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. Please continue.
So he has tended, and Dillashaw is obviously a very good offensive wrestler as well, and a tremendous top position grappler. Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a way that Dillashaw can enforce his own pace as well. Is that just dictating the wrestling exchanges. It might turn it into an ugly fight.
Yeah.
Like the Yarn fight was at the end. Notably, Dillashaw-Sandhagen, once Sandhagen had stopped turning his back quite so much in that fight, was actually quite difficult to take down.
Yeah.
For long periods of Dillashaw just kind of holding him up against the fence. So we might get a bit more of that inertia back from Jan Sterling too. I still think Dillashaw would be well advised to do this, just because Sterling is so... just because I don't think Sterling can really pass out how much energy he spends on grappling, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think he's ever had the experience to train that like instinct into him. He's a hard scrambler, and he can't afford to keep that pace up the way TJ can. He also has very little experience at actually having to stop takedowns in the first place, because nobody wants to take him down. And on the few occasions that they have been willing to, Brett Johns got him down, Cody Stamann got him down 3 times, Petr Yan, of course, took him down at will after he started to gas, but even when he was still in the stage of starting to gas, just started taking him down. And Dillashaw is not only a good positional grappler, he is a nasty ground and pound artist from top position when he has a mind to be.
Mm-hmm. John Lineker's jaw, did he not?
Yes. That maybe it's not the thing he wants to do, but it's secretly the thing he's best at, that swarming approach. That's what his top guard striking looks like. Oh, you're literally frozen in the pocket with me. Go, go, go. Yeah. He just starts crushing. So, yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think it would be a good idea. Maybe not even right away, but as the fight goes on, especially once you start to see Sterling get tired, Dillashaw just mixing in some quick, surprising takedowns, they'll probably work. And they may lead to a precipitous decline for Sterling's gas tank and his confidence. I don't know. As much as we loved it, you can't deny that, like, and as brilliant as it was, that these were some excellent, like, sort of gambles that he made in his strategic decision making. Sterling's win over Jan in the rematch is kind of fluky. Like, I think
it's not fluky. It's just It's just
he walked a very narrow line.
Yeah, it's such a narrow path to victory.
Very narrow path. And it's not the kind of fight where, if and when a rematch, a rubber match between those guys takes place, we're going to be like, oh, there's no way Petr Yan can come back. He didn't solve Petr Yan.
Oh.
So, yeah. As I said,
I mean, I think it's possible. It's possible he can bank. I think it is possible he can replicate that. I think it's possible he can bank early rounds.
Yeah.
If Dillashaw is getting hurt early, I think there's some interesting tactical things to consider. Like, essentially, like Sandhagen can, if Sterling is actually like a good the attacker and level change guy.
Mm-hmm.
And the knees, body punches, and kicks are all things that he throws. And again, Dillashaw has mostly, with this sort of somewhat exception of Sandhagen, in someone to fight people where he is always the more diverse guy. Mm-hmm. Is the kicker.
Mm-hmm.
He is mostly fighting against punches. And I do think that, like, just throwing in shots to the body will work super well against TJ Dillashaw, because it did for Sandhagen when he tried it, because he's just constantly fighting out of like a level change crouch.
Yeah, and his head is an open target, and he's just not great defensively. And not to give Sterling too little credit either, by the way. Like, as much as it was a narrow path to victory, it didn't, against Jan, it didn't, as we said after the fact, it didn't have to be that narrow. There were things for him to build on. Sterling's capable of boxing more confidently and aggressively, for example, than he did in that fight.
Also, it wasn't like a controversial decision either.
No, it was a very clear win.
Winnable for Aljo. In case TJ shows up looking like he has become physically depleted in some way. I saw him posting a thing, like a picture on Instagram or whatever it is, of him saying he's feeling the best he's ever felt and looking the best he's ever looked.
I've never heard that.
To be honest,
before.
My first reaction when I looked at him and how insanely ripped he was just like, you look exactly like you did when you fought at flyweight.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he's always been a pretty shredded guy, though, since he hit his prime.
Yeah.
And all natty.
Of course. Yeah, I think that he's still the bigger puncher. He's still just impossible to keep down. He doesn't tire out.
Yeah.
It's just another like incredibly rough style matchup for Sterling.
He doesn't tire out, and while Sterling is maybe the best grappler he's ever faced, he has never been submitted or even come all that close. Again, there was a scary position against Rafael Assunção, which he very patiently defended and rode out. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, no one's even come close to like getting an arm around his neck. Not saying it couldn't happen. Sterling is a league above most of the guys he's faced as submission artists, but yeah, you got to pick Dillashaw.
Yeah, I think I got to pick Dillashaw.
All right. Well, picking two challengers to win. I don't even know if they will be upsets. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion both of these dudes are going to be favorites, even though, and I suppose actually technically, again, I'm falling for it. Oliveira is not defending a title. It feels that way, but he did lose his belt just before his last fight. So, but the two guys who have not been holding the titles recently, we are expecting to win. And I have a feeling both will at least be moderate favorites, because it just seems like, as cool and interesting as these matchups are, and I love seeing any matchup between, any pair of matchups with four such high-level fighters, there does just seem to be like a big strategic advantage in one corner at first glance, which no matter how you try to pick it apart, you can't quite remove that weight from the scale. It's like, oh, well, this guy just has these advantages. How is the opponent? The opponent's going to have to get real lucky or bring in something I haven't seen before to win. All right, let's take a break then. When we come back, the frequently aforementioned Petr Yan is taking on Sean O'Malley. And probably taking out Sean O'Malley. Oops, spoilers. I guess we'll get into that after this break, as well as Beneil Dariush versus Mateusz Gamrot after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We're just twatting about over here, getting ready to discuss. If the other fights were if the first two fights were both quickly revealed themselves to be maybe more predictable than they seem at first, more predictable than you want them to be for how exciting they still feel, then this one's not a surprise.
This is a blessed relief.
This is a blessed relief. Petr Yan, Sean O'Malley, and I'm sure the Yan heads feel that way too. They've been through the ringer lately. The indignity of watching their god felled by the undeniably mortal Aljamain Sterling. Now is the time for revenge. And
rarely has there ever been more disheartening fall from grace.
Yeah.
A particular segment of the fandom.
Yeah. For me, it was like a classic revenge story trope. Where did I get my vicarious revenge by seeing Aljamain Sterling win? Yes. But I found out in the process that really, revenge isn't as satisfying as I hoped it would be. In fact, I felt pity for my victim, Petr Yan. and for his insipid fans. But anyway,
I did not feel pity for his fans. They deserved everything they got.
But anyway, Petr Yan is an exceptionally good fighter. And Sean O'Malley isn't. So every single time. Yeah, please, you take it away.
Well, to be fair, I genuinely give Sean O'Malley a lot of credit for this one. Because some people were saying that I was talking to, they were like, this is a fight where he has nothing to lose. He's number 13 or whatever he is in the ranking. He's fighting the number 1 or number 2, whatever Petr Yan is. I think he's probably the number 1 contender.
Yeah. The guy who thrashed the current champion.
Yeah. Everyone's expecting him to lose, so it's just house money for him.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, sure, that's kind of true, but also Petr Yan is going to hurt him.
Yeah, he does have something to lose.
Yeah, and the other thing that he has to lose, one thing he has to lose is his health,
his consciousness, possibly his unbroken bones, various health related things.
Yeah, and also the other thing that he has to lose is his somehow still intact air of plausible deniability.
Yeah.
So the whole, just the Cheeto thing was just a weird fluke.
Yep.
He was totally about to come back and win against Pedro Munoz. It was the eye poke that in fact robbed him of his easy win. This weird way that when Sean O'Malley has faltered, there has been a ready-made excuse for his army of also extremely annoying fans.
Yes. Worse than the Yan fans. At least I can understand the zealotry of the Yan fans, because Petr Yan is obviously...
He is a sensationally good, fun, deep, you're really, you're watching something special when you watch Petr Yan.
Yeah, whereas Sean O'Malley, I'll just share this again, because it was the final nail in the coffin for me ever giving a shit about this guy. And I'm going to defend him as well over the course of this episode, and I've given him credit where it's due in the past. I don't think he's, bad, as some people have tricked themselves into thinking that he has no capabilities as a fighter. That's obviously foolish to think that. But the final nail in the coffin for me respecting Sean O'Malley was when I think he was fighting, I think it was Cheeto, actually. And this was obviously a big break kind of fight for him. They had a whole pre-fight package where the two fighters were interviewed and sharing their stories. And of course, Cheeto has some really harrowing elements to his story. Was talking about his daughter and that he's an immigrant from a poor background, and this clearly means a lot to him. And then they went to Sean O'Malley and he was like, yeah, ever since I was 14, I really wanted to be famous. That was it. I was like, you are the least interesting, least deserving person I've ever heard. It's like when they have The Voice or Britain's Got Talent or something, and everyone has an incredible tragic sob story because they've been selected, but always one doofus slips through who just sucks and who has the shallowest, pettiest reason for being there you can imagine. That's Sean O'Malley. That being said, I do not think Sean O'Malley is a bad fighter. Sean O'Malley is a very dangerous striker. Sean O'Malley is a much better boxer, I think, than people want to admit. And you put this guy in a fight with Chris Moutinho, and he makes him look like the gimme that he is. Did Moutinho excitingly refuse to die? Yes. He was also mercifully saved by the referee at the end of the fight because O'Malley spent the entire fight destroying him. His footwork isn't great, but it's decent enough. He's a sharp, fast, powerful puncher. He's really, really creative with how he puts his strikes out there. Sean O'Malley, there's a lot to like about Sean O'Malley's striking. There's a lot of early Conor McGregor and Sean O'Malley's striking. The other thing, though, is that, literally every time he's taken what is an obvious and meaningful step up, he has looked he's looked not ready. He's looked bad. He didn't look good against Cheeto Vera. He didn't look good against Pedro Munoz. I don't think Munoz looked particularly good against him either. I think there's every reason to think that O'Malley was winning that fight at the time that it was stopped. But
I mean, it was 2 rounds in, and he'd obviously lost the first round.
Sure. I think the momentum.
The second.
I think, the momentum shift was in play at the time that the eye poke happened. But the point is that he hasn't looked ready for this level. He hasn't been impressive when he's had to step up. And there are a bunch of defensive liabilities. And, the man is exceedingly low kickable. He's not good defensively in general, but especially with low kicks. And he clearly doesn't like being pressured, and he clearly feels extra pressure in these kinds of matchups where he just doesn't deliver. He becomes a lot more sort of reticent and held back. And that's not a good look for him because he's not a good defensive fighter, really, at all. So, I'll give him credit where it's due. I will not even pretend that he deserves this matchup or has any real chance of winning it. I guess maybe he could hurt Petr Yan. I mean, again, he's sharp, he's dangerous. You going to finish Petr Yan? He's going to convert that into a win? I don't think so. I don't think it'll happen to begin with, but I certainly don't think if he gets lucky and drops Yan that he's going to win because of it. He will still lose, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best case scenario for Sean O'Malley is that he manages to catch Yan at some point early in first round and then hurts him worse than anyone has ever hurt him before.
Yeah.
With the exception of maybe, and we're talking about him again, John Dodson.
Yeah.
He, again, like a big puncher who still only rocked Yan, didn't exactly was in absolutely no danger of finishing him.
Yeah.
I mean, O'Malley hasn't knocked out anyone who isn't old, pretty much.
Yep.
Or, super fragile, like Thomas Almeida, or he's needed to pile up tons of offense to do it.
Yep.
And then, other than that, we've seen Petr Yan against a big, dangerous, diverse, weight striker, and honestly, Corey Sandhagen is much better than Sean O'Malley.
He is much, much better.
Enforces more of a pace.
And fought one of his best ever fights in that meeting. And, could not hold back the tide of Petr Yan.
Sandhagen is a better grappler. He enforces more of a pace.
Yep.
He uses more tools. And he's probably at this point, I would say he is a better defensive fighter than Sean O'Malley, who really rely on his length.
Yeah, without question.
And we just saw that I don't think there's any reason to assume why all the stuff that Petr Yan did in that fight against Corey Sandhagen won't simply work better.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just get in behind the jab and then crush O'Malley with combinations. We'll be able to. I don't know if he's going to low kick him like Pedro Munoz did, but he will kick him to the body a lot.
Yeah, he probably will.
Probably punch him to the body a lot.
He will. He'll extend exchanges way past the point where O'Malley is used to his lower level opponents being scared off, and it'll work even better than the same general tactic did against Sandhagen. He will take him down. He will turn him to paste from top position or submit him. He will humiliate him. Fighting Petr Yan is scary.
Yes.
Sean O'Malley's scaredy. So it's not a good matchup for him.
As I said, I'm genuinely impressed at him for accepting it. Because
yeah, I guess.
I think this is a real fight, this is a fight which might just end up crushing any of the mystique that he could have had. And to be honest, he's had a very well managed career thus far, where they've given him people like Thomas Almeida, where you're just I know why you gave him this matchup.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Pedro Munoz, when you're I know why you gave him this matchup. These are the highest ranked possible people that he could beat, that he had he had just massive stylistic edges over. But even the Munoz fight was just, it was just ugly.
Yeah, and it wasn't a great approach from Munoz either. Munoz himself looked flat, and O'Malley still didn't shine.
that he was clearly just unwilling to throw unless Munoz had already committed with his hands, and just led to Munoz just steadily racking up low kicks. So yeah, he's failed at his layups, and now it seems like they're just jumping to like one of the most brutal style matchups for him in the division.
Yeah, one of the most brutal matchups.
He's going to get slaughtered.
Yeah, one of the most brutal style matchups for anyone, honestly. Yeah. Like, I've shit on Petr Yan enough times to unabashedly say, as I have, by the way, always said, Petr Yan's really fucking good at this. And really dangerous everywhere. He has been a fully complete fighter for like 6 years now. He's a beast. And it's going to feel like, I mean, it could feel like anything. Again, Petr Yan has so many options for how to win this. All that I know is it's going to feel like, what if Chris Moutinho started whooping my ass? Because you said get in right? You said get in behind the jab, but funnily enough, like, the turn against Sandhagen was largely Yan eschewing the jab. And just walk.
I meant getting in behind
O'Malley's.
I see. He's going to get in, inside O'Malley's jab.
Absolutely. Just walk in with his guard up and let O'Malley, like, through sheer proximity, force O'Malley to pull the trigger and then punish him however he wants. And pressure, and chase him when he tries to get out of the pocket and make him take bigger risks just trying to get away. And if he stands his ground, grab him and dump him on his ass. Or kick his legs. Or punch him in the body. Or knock him out. So yeah, it's not a good matchup for Sean O'Malley. There are few good matchups, I think, for Sean O'Malley in the top 15. This is possibly the very worst.
Yep. Agree.
So, yeah, and I don't really know that it is. I mean, on the one hand, O'Malley's fans, whatever it is that they've grabbed onto, seeing, a fellow mental 14-year-old in the cage, perhaps. I don't even know that this is a can't-lose matchup, even, like, reputationally. Because, yeah, like as you said, it's the end of plausible deniability for Sean O'Malley. It's the end of being like, well, if things had shaken out a little differently, I think he's about to get crushed here. It could be not just bad for his health, but also a really bad look for his career. And people do recover from those things all the time, but Sean O'Malley has already had enough unimpressive moments that this just might be the end of anyone who isn't an actual 14-year-old having any real hope for O'Malley being a good fighter. We'll see.
I think that's why I have to say I genuinely kind of respect him for taking it, because that's just seems to be what comes out with the other end. Whatever you look at it, it's just that he's going to get destroyed in a way that only the most delusional people are going to be like, well, actually, it was because he ate the wrong thing, or he had the wrong, he smoked the wrong brand of weed beforehand, and if he just, like the current brand, the current last reserves of the Conor McGregor fandom that you get, where they just have to find the most insane possible reasons for why their guy was actually gonna win, or just got robbed somehow.
Right.
It's going to be one of those ones where it just dispels all illusions.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to think that's the most likely outcome. All right, then let's spare a few words here at the end of this episode for the fourth matchup from the top of this main card. Beneil Dariush, Mateusz Gamrot. Gamrot, of course, the beneficiary of a little highway robbery against Arman Tsarukyan. A genuinely bad decision, I think. Though neither of us was really all that upset about it, because Gamrot didn't look bad. He's still obviously a very good fighter, and at, several years older than Tsarukyan, it's cool to see him now get his chance to take on top-ranked matchups like this. And I think we, once again, sort of just agree at first glance that this might be a tough one for the established fighter in Beneil Dariush.
Yeah, I mean, once again, this is one of these fights where I think it comes down to the wrestler simply enforcing their area of strength.
Yeah.
I mean, like, one of the things that shocked me about this fight is that Beneil Dariush is 33 years old.
Yeah, how is that possible?
He's got like the whole Silver Fox thing going on. Like he's 3 years younger than TJ Dillashaw.
Yeah, that's weird. That's really weird.
What is going on?
Yeah, I mean,
I tend to think of him as being in the sort of Rafael Assunção part of his career.
Yeah,
you know, he's sort of in his. I mean, he's not, but he's not as removed from his athletic prime as you might think. I think is the major
right.
Is the major talking point with Beneil Dariush. This streak that he's on shouldn't be sneezed at. Admittedly, a lot of these people were either not that good or on the end of their career. But he's riding a 7-fight win streak in the UFC.
Yeah, at a certain point, a quantity can outweigh quality, and none of these have been bad fighters. And he has beaten an awful lot of them in a row. It's easy to forget, to your first point, that Dariush made his UFC debut way back now in 2014, and he was only 6-0 at the time. So he has accrued the vast majority of his now 26-fight record. He's fought 20 times in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
So he is a genuine veteran, but he started pretty early in both his career and his life. So,
yep.
Yeah,
it's weird. When he was a quote unquote prospect, I never really thought of him like that.
Right. Yeah. Even then, it was like, I think because he was such a savvy prospect.
Mm-hmm.
Like you look at his early fights.
Because he just looks old.
That too. He looks old. He's got the ass and lower back of a much older man. But he had a really savvy style. I mean, even those, like that fight with Michael Johnson, how long ago was that? Ages ago now, 2015. It was somehow like 6 fights in, but little over a year after his first UFC fight. And even in that one, which he definitely should have lost, he looked super crafty. He looked like a vet. He was in there jabbing and moving his feet and like limiting this more dynamic fighter. It's kind of funny given that this latter stage of Dariush's career has really seen him be not savvy at all.
Yes.
He's become a maniac. I don't know exactly what the reason for that turn is. At some point, a red mist fell over Dariush's vision, and he just started wanting to kill. But now he's become what looks like much more of like a King's MMA fighter. Aggressive, willing to get hurt and fire back, and then whenever the opportunity presents itself, will dominate you on the ground. He is an insanely good positional grappler. The only misstep on the ground in his entire career was that submission to Michael Chiesa, which was essentially just like a bad turn of luck. I mean, Chiesa is one of those instantaneously dangerous fighters in transitions. It was a fight that Dariush was dominating Chiesa on the ground, and then just, one bad transition, basically. And he got caught and couldn't escape. But otherwise, he has destroyed people on the ground, which does still make a matchup like this interesting. Like a lot of the ones we've already discussed, it's hard to think of a lot of people in Dariush's resume who have wanted to even try doing to him what we expect Gamrot to do, which is to, take him down as often as possible.
And, I mean, you mentioned that he just got caught in that Michael Chiesa fight. That is how Beneil Dariush has lost pretty much every single fight he's ever had.
That's true, actually.
He's never really lost a decision.
With the exception of he should have lost the decision in the Michael Johnson fight. That's the
And
only
even then, it's very
time.
close. Yeah.
That's the only time where I think he's been like outfought for several rounds.
Yeah, it's mostly other than that, it's just been him getting caught. And obviously, you know, there was the draw against Evan Dunham where he got kind of smoked towards the end of the fight.
He gassed.
And I think that is probably, but you know, other than that, just remarkably consistent, even against against a fairly wide variety of opponents as well.
That's a very good point. I never really thought of it in those terms. Dariush is a guy who beats you until you surprise him almost all the time, or he's in an insane war, which he tends to win.
I mean, it's shocking how little people have been able to, in decisions against him.
Yeah,
no one's ever really been able to out wrestle him particularly effectively, and he's just too potent on the feet for people to easily win decisions against him.
Yeah,
I guess it has always been him getting caught.
I guess that's why he feels like such a old veteran fighter. That's just the way you usually feel about that kind of fight. Oh, this guy might get caught because he's fragile, but damn, is he good? That's Beneil Dariush.
But I do think that the more we talk about it, the more I do find myself, really sort of appreciating Beneil Dariush and thinking, wow, maybe he really can do this, because Amrot is going to have to win a decision.
Yep.
He is not finishing Beneil Dariush unless something weird happens. He could do. Amrot has definitely improved his boxing. He was landing on Aljamain Sterling, and Dariush has never been the most durable fighter. But I think more it's the fact that Gamrot just goes for takedowns, is extremely hard to dissuade, is really hard to get. It is really hard to get positions on.
Yeah,
and that Dariush isn't really Dariush in another sort of King's MMA style. I think is much more of a top position player than he is a all around guard grappler.
For sure,
his style is built around offense and pressure, and I think that comes down to both his top game and his top game, his wrestling, and his striking are all kind of built with that in mind. That's, I think, one of the reasons why he goes nuts is that he's and offense is running out. If you're losing, that means you need more offense.
Yeah.
But I think Gamrot is someone who is going to shoot takedowns, or who should, in again one of our themes of the episode, shoot takedowns, and a lot of them.
He will. That's Gamrot. He didn't. Aljamain Sterling's an incredible grappler and wrestler. It didn't dissuade him at all, and they worked more and more as the fight goes on. It's he just doesn't give up. He is a pace wrestler.
And we saw basically in their fights, their two fights with Diego Ferreira, both won, but Dariush was also exhausted by the end of the Ferreira fight. And Gamrot didn't really get the chance for Ferreira to be exhausted, but pretty sure that is what his, by the end of that fight, we saw the torrid pace that he was fighting Tsarukyan at is just not one that I think Dariush can hang with if he's defending takedowns and trying to get up.
Yeah. Yeah, it has become much closer in my mind the more we've talked about this. I'll say that.
Same.
Because I've never been particularly impressed with Gamrot as a striker. He never really looks bad. He's very fast. And he is himself a super experienced fighter. That comes through. He picks his spots really well. He's always willing to, take the opening that is given to him, rather than forcing things, and that applies to his willingness to transition as well. Gamrot doesn't ever want to just strike; he wants to strike in such a way that he can hit you with another takedown. But there is the fact that this is both a positive and a negative for him. Almost irrespective of the opponent, unless it's dead easy, Gamrot doesn't really hold anyone down. He doesn't really try to.
Yep.
He, and that could really work against Beneil, because Do I want to be tangling on the ground with this guy the whole time? Probably not. Even if it might be a better idea to keep him on his back. On the other hand, like, if you're not going to shut Beneil out of the fight at any point, completely shut him out, you're entirely relying on your ability over just 3 rounds to exhaust him, and that's the key to you winning. It's a lot of time for Beneil to be as dangerous as Beneil is. And Gamrot's boxing defense, he is like a complete footwork machine. Not that his footwork is even all that great, but he moves laterally, he moves a lot. That's all he really has defensively. Moving away, moving out of your sight, staying far away, only closing the distance on his own terms. You can chase him, though, and once you get him in the pocket, he's just not a very good boxer. He gets really, really square. He routinely overthrows on his whatever his backhand is, and literally like falls over into the pocket. Like, this is a guy who can be countered all day. This is a guy that if you can push him backwards and corner him and stick him in the pocket where he can't easily get out, you can hurt him. You can hit him clean. He's tough, but the openings are there. I suppose I'll still pick Gamrot on the basis of that Evan Dunham fight because, the thing is his style doesn't require him or even want him to try to hold people down. He's going to shoot 25 takedowns. And he's going to make you fight your way back to your feet. And then at a certain point, he's going to let you so he can get back to space and look for the next opening. And Dariush himself, while super dangerous and confident, is an absolute mess coming forward. So there's reactive takedown openings all over the fucking place.
That Dunham fight is not that win is not a one which is defined by like Evan Dunham's rock solid level of control in the fight.
No,
it was him getting
just pace,
getting torched, and then just still being there afterwards. So I think if Gamrot just keeps his pace high regardless of success, if his takedowns aren't working, I think that's something it's just factored into his style.
Yeah.
Not going to be upset if things aren't working.
Every one of the fights on this win streak, this incredible win streak that Beneil is on, every one that hasn't been defined by him having a clear grappling advantage has been the kind of fight where, like, when it ends, you're like, woo, he's lucky that didn't go any longer. He is playing with fire. He is putting everything into, like, first and second round assaults in these fights. And the possibility of the opponent surviving and still having something left, still having the wherewithal to press him, it looks just as bad as it did when Evan Dunham did exactly that. So, got to stick with Gamrot.
I've definitely moved more towards Dariush
Same.
over the course of our discussion, but I do still favor Gamrot.
Yeah. All right, well, that is those are anyway the top 4 fights on UFC 280. There's a lot more good stuff here. I mean, Caitlin Chookagian, Manon Fiorot is an interesting fight. Bilal Muhammad, Sean Brady is an interesting fight. We've got Nikita Krylov, Volkan Oezdemir, which is the best fight I've ever seen, and I haven't even seen it yet. Great matchup. A lot of good stuff. We got a gimme fight for Carol Hoza, who I really like, so I'm happy to see her get ideally should be a gimme fight, but who knows? She's had her problems as well. Very solid.
Once again, kicking off at the bottom of the card when no one will see her.
Yep, great. That's what you do with good, talented prospects, especially in divisions where you are absolutely starved for title challengers. Great. Anyway, UFC 280 is...
Makhachev.
What's that?
Makhachev is fighting.
Oh, Muhammad Makhachev, of course. Taking on Malcolm Gordon. Lot of really good stuff all over this card. The main card especially is stellar, and I really look forward to it. If you guys want to hear us have anything at all to say about last week's card, which will basically just be us entirely sort of crying in both shame and relief that Rafael Assunção once again managed to win in his classic style, you should head over to patreon.com/heavyhands. It's $3 a month. You will also find, as I've mentioned several times, 2 Jose Aldo fight commentaries up there. They are both uploaded. There's Aldo versus Faber. There's Aldo versus Mendez 2. 2 sensational performances. 1 really spectacularly great fight. Both with some asshole just like incessantly talking over them. So if that appeals to you, you'll also find those when you're looking for the Grosso Araujo retrospective. And until next week, when we will hopefully have lots of interesting UFC 280 stuff to look back on, as well as the upcoming Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen main event. Until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands. I didn't say our Twitter handles, did I?
Whatever. Nowhere to go.
Yeah. Go to Twitter.
Evil Greg Jackson at Boxing Bush.